future trends, deep insights, industry leaders. This is the iGaming Next podcast with your host, Heidi Lofthus.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Solutions, the leading iGaming PAM platform with a modular approach, including many benefits like a fast, secure, and scalable API-based platform, integrated with all major third-party products and services. Make sure you head over to Pragmatic Solutions and join our smart thinking.
Good afternoon, Alasdair Lane and Mikolaj Jucewics. Welcome back, Mikko.
Thank you for having me.
Last time, where you and I discussed how you build your leadership program. And this you do with Franklin Covey. And you have now introduced us to Alasdair Lane from Franklin Covey. So thank you for that, Mikko. And Alasdair, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. Tell us, you also work with leadership development, but from the provider point of view at Franklin Covey. Can you tell us a little bit about what work that you do?
So my role as a client partner is to engage with clients like Mikolaj at William Hill and work through solutions for them in terms of identifying what they're trying to do around the business impact. With Mikolaj, it was looking at how we could impact the leadership development. And and then we create a multi-touch, multi-mode, multi-channel blended approach to a learning and development initiative to support whatever they're trying to achieve.
There you go. And how did you sort of find these guys, Mikko?
I think Franklin Covey is one of the most known providers in the industry. So as we spoke last time, Heidi, about the whole leadership strategy for William Hill, we have very well established junior leadership program, which is delivered virtually, which is online, fully accessible to all the leaders. Then we have quite strong mid-level program, also delivered in-house by our talent and capability team, which is called Leadership Diploma, accredited by the Institute of Leadership and Management. And over a year ago, we were looking at the senior leadership program. So a program that may land very well at the third level. So, we have established essentials, then the diploma for mid-level, and we had a gap in the senior audience. So, of course, we could jump into that challenge and, deliver something in-house. But I think what many people appreciate is a mixture of internal and external perspectives. And I think if there are any leadership development learning professionals listening to that podcast, Franklin Covey. If no, you've seen these books. I mean, you've seen the videos like Green and Clean. You've probably read 7 Habits. So you are familiar with the concepts. And I think it was quite easy step for us to really dial into a very reputable company that has got great framework. As this was request from our leadership team. They wanted some content that really works, that is proven, that has been delivered globally with a big name on it. So it was definitely a good starting point, a good buy-in as well for our team to get a provider with reputation and a content that truly works. So that's how it started, I think.
I'm agreeing with everything that I can't refer to as William Hill, but in terms of it's a wide known, most people have read 7 Habits. I'm thinking most people within sort of the coaching sphere, the people sort of following leadership development and training, absolutely. And for myself, I think that these are, habits you know, to take on as a person, not only sort of within the business and how you sort of development team to get greater revenue in the end. For those that are outside this sphere but still are interested, what are the 7 habits, and what is it that sort of make you use them to build your programs, and for my sort of coaching education to have it as literature in the courses, etc.?
The 7 Habits was written by Stephen Covey in 1989, so over 30 years ago. And the research that he did was into, well, how are the most successful people effective? And he identified these 7 themes, and they're by no means sequential. It's for people can look through the lens of the 7 Habits to identify what they're doing really, really well. You know, we've got to where we have in life and been successful on the behaviours that we've adopted and the habits that we've developed over time, whether they're good or bad. You know, that we have both. But the 7 Habits was this identification of what do successful people do on a regular basis, and then using he created this framework so people can use it as a frame of reference to see where they're. You know, I always say that look at it from a point of view from where you're doing well, not just where there might be a gap, because you find people are doing some things extremely well and they don't even realize they're doing it. And more often than not, I hear the comment, well, that's common sense, isn't it? But it is to them because they've adopted that habit, whatever it might be. And they use it on a regular basis. But having a framework like this allows them to see what they are doing really well, so that they can continue to repeat it, but they can also, you know, in any environment, whether it's work or it's family, you can then demonstrate that and help other people to adopt the same practices. So the 7 Habits is effectively, it's broken into 2 or 3 bits. The first part is how do I lead myself effectively? The second part is how do I win with and through other people? And then the last part that holds it all together, habit 7 is sharpen the saw, but for a lot of people, the term well-being probably makes more sense. It's, you know, how do you encourage yourself and motivate yourself to have enough energy and emotion to be able to deal with things and lead people and develop effective relationships. Because if you're burnt out, you're not going to do that effectively. So hopefully that's given you a bit more of an understanding.
The basic principles, I would say as well. I asked you guys to think of like what's your favorite habit, or the one that sort of comes closest to mind. Did you get to think of any?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the 2 that have been life-changing for me were habit 2, which is begin with the end in mind, which is clearly getting to understand, you know, what is it you're trying to truly achieve. You know, from a business perspective, we talk to people all the time around the activities they want to do. But then when you ask the question, for what purpose, what do you want to achieve, what is the end in mind or the job to be done, they then have to pause and then think, because we can do lots of activities, right? But if they're in service of trying to achieve something, you end up having too many activities and not enough of the right stuff. But knowing what the end in mind is, you can reverse engineer it. But where the powerful impact for me has been created is actually coupling habit 2 and habit 5, which is seek first to understand before being understood. And most people listen to then talk and get their point across. They don't actually hear what is truly being said. And what I found when I asked the question with clients, or even just with my 6-year-old daughter, you know, when she gets frustrated around something, what are you truly trying to achieve? What do you want? Well, I don't put it in those terms. She's 6, but the point being is, what are you trying to get to? And then listening to the frustrations. And where I've seen habit 5 really impact with leaders is when they have this understanding that you don't have to agree with everybody in your team, but you do have to listen and acknowledge their concerns. And just that acknowledgement that you truly heard them is incredibly powerful because it builds trust. and then people start to show up in a completely different way because they feel like they've really been listened to.
For myself, I agree with the start with the end in mind, but I still got some job to do there. But it's good to have it as a reminder.
Yeah, and I think the key thing is, as I was saying, it's not sequential. You don't go through it in a process and then come out the other end, the finished article. You know, it's an opportunity to kind of reflect and think, well, okay, where could I improve now? Or, you know, what am I doing well? Which lever could I pull on now to be more effective? Or what language am I hearing from my team? You know, because habit 4, win-win in sales and marketing. Our experience is you get marketing saying, well, it's not my fault that we're not hitting revenue targets. It's because and so if you're hearing that kind of a language, well, actually, maybe we could apply a lever here and spend a bit of time trying to focus on habit 4 and improve collaboration. So it's just a thing that you as long as you are aware that it's there to help test and adjust gradually over a period of time, and you never come out at the finished item.
Make your own. What about you, Mikolaj?
Let me check in the book. Let me just.
On this, okay.
I mean, I totally agree with Alasdair that all of them are connected. So it does make sense that we apply all of them at different times in our lives as well, unconsciously, when we are not sometimes aware we do it. Absolutely, end in mind. So knowing your purpose, knowing, the value that you bring, when connected with synergizing, so valuing differences and building teams that can win. But the one who is, I think, number one for me is the seventh habit. So sharpening the so, having awareness and reflection about what you do. So every time you're delivering a project, every time you're evaluating something, coming back and giving yourself a moment to reflect and think, all right, what do we do differently? Having the growth mindset. And also having a daily reflection on what helps you work better, what helps you feel more in balance internally. Because that has got a huge link to well-being, as Alasdair said. So for me, number 7. But as we said, all of them are connected. I think it's worth to mention, though, that the program that we've worked with Alasdair's team was actually not 7 habits. We knew about 7 habits, and we had access to this as well, thanks to having partnership with the team. And so we could deliver these workshops, and we did. Although the core was the 4 essential roles of leadership. So there are actually a couple of products that we could choose, and there's really a whole world of products. Once you get into the platform of Franklin Covey, it's like overwhelming.
Exactly.
And for someone who is such a junkie of learning and so obsessed with any learning, I was like, wow, like how will I learn all that facilitation, because there's so many different programs. Which is a huge advantage of working with Franklin Covey, that you can start small with one framework, but there's so many different concepts to use. So this was a huge advantage. And at the end, we decided to invest in the 4 essential roles of leadership.
Thank you for branding and doing an online sales there, Mikolaj. But I'm thinking if we keep talking like this, it's going to be a bit sectish. We know the habits by heart and the numbers. And I'm thinking if we would sort of go a little bit into the design of what it is that you're building together, what do we need to know about the 4 roles before entering this?
Okay, well, everything that Mikolaj, quite eloquently said there, that we've got a lot of content, and the foundation is the 7 habits. That's where it all comes from. And when people ask about, well, how have you updated it? You quite rightly said, Heidi, they're based on principles, principles that are never going to change. And so with the 4 essential roles of leadership, a lot of the 7 habits language is firmly within that content, but it's coupled with a significant amount of leadership research that was done about 4 or 5 years ago. And Franklin Covey, with the Rewired group, did some research with about, I think it was over 500 or 600 organizations at the C level, and then all the senior leaders underneath. And the questions were around what do you see as the most common breakdowns of leadership? And the 4 themes that stood out head and shoulders above everything was there was a lack of or no trust whatsoever. There was no clear vision or strategy. There was an inability to execute the strategies. And then the last one was that there was no coaching or development of potential talent within the organisation. And in fact, one of the questions around the coaching was the results were quite frightening. And over 100,000 people were asked the question, do you feel like you could do more for your organisation? And 92% of them said yes. So if you've got, a significant number of people within your organisation all believing that they could do more, why are we not tapping into it? And so when I spoke to William Hill initially, the challenge was based around senior leaders not looking inwards to their teams and developing their own people, despite the significant amount of opportunities that William Hill staff have got for development. I mean, I've never seen a brochure or this catalogue of development opportunities available in any other organisation. And the talent team that we've ended up working with, Mikolaj and the rest of the group have been, you've got PhDs, you've got, people who worked in multiple sectors, and just a whole raft of very clever, very educated, very capable people at developing initiatives to develop people. Yet the senior leaders weren't utilising that wealth of information and knowledge. So they lent on us and said, well, how do we do that? And I'll hand over to Mikolaj at this point, because that's where all the research that they did internally kind of helped to mould what the program would look like.
Exactly. And also sort of how do you deliver, where are people, who are the people, what's the structure as well?
Thanks. Yes. Thanks for nice comments, Alasdair, by the way. And yes, so as I said, we have quite huge engagement in terms of junior and mid-level audience, but there was some sort of lack of engagement in the senior team, mainly because usually the excuse you get from senior execs is, I have no time, or I've learned it all already, I've done leadership programs in the past. So we really had to develop a framework that will help them engage and to see what's in it for me. So first of all, Franklin Covey, bringing a company that has got a great framework, which they have heard about, and that is really relatable for them. Secondly, choosing from the whole wealth of different products that Franklin Covey is offering, that one that really lands within current time. So as Alasdair said, huge impact on trust. So the first module of the program which we delivered was building a culture of trust, which very highly is linked to what we've done within Balance and our balanced leadership initiatives the year before. So it was a continuation of what we already had established. A coaching module, which was very also, in line with what we believe in. We do a lot of coaching courses at William Hill, and we do want to support one-on-one coaching conversations. So this module was as well really relatable for them. And then two middle modules, creating vision and then executing strategy, are very challenging, right? Because sometimes people are saying there's no clear vision, or there is vision, but we don't execute it, or there's just too much change. And we knew that William Hill will be merging with 888. So we knew that there are huge change of strategies on the horizon. So we wanted to provide framework for leaders to be prepared for that. So that's how we've chosen 4 essential roles out of the whole wealth of the offerings. And then also you've asked Heidi about the delivery. So how we have delivered it. I mean, it was a program of a high scale. I must say I've never done such a big one. It was over 120 leaders, nearly 130. So truly a huge group. So what we've done is that we've delivered 4 core modules, which are split into 3 hours. So it's 4 times 3 hours. And we've done it every couple of weeks. First module was delivered face-to-face in London. Last module also delivered face-to-face in London. And then the middle modules delivered virtually. In between these modules, leaders receive these beautiful workbooks. So we've got like plenty of these cool things with exercises, assessments, journeys, implementation journeys. So basically, the whole Franklin Covey team is leading you hand by hand, showing you what to do. I mean, I'm trying to find just to show an example of how it looks like. So basically, you're receiving a timeline, and you know exactly what to do each month. Hold on, let me find out. Implementation plan, right? So you've got your implementation plans, month by month. Everything says, all right, here's what you do, week 1, week 2, week 3. So people are basically guided hand by hand what to do. And in between core modules, we had group coaching sessions. I mean, I know, Heidi, you're a fan of coaching and group coaching as well. I think one-on-one coaching is very impactful, but group coaching in small groups, I think we had in groups of 6 up to 8. I think it's very impactful as well because you get that more personal interaction with a coach, but at the same time, you can discuss with colleagues and see what they're doing and keep each other accountable. So that's the approach we took, right? So some face-to-face modules, some virtual modules for the core 4 essential roles. And then in between, working with e-learning, working with your workbooks, working with your plans, and group coaching sessions, and also 360. I think we haven't spoken about 360 yet, but I think we'll speak about 360 when you ask us about measuring impact, right?
Exactly.
So this was a huge buy-in as well, actually, you know. Sometimes people may not be so interested in content itself, or they're interested, but for them, the biggest value of the program was 360, you know, gathering all the feedback. But I think we can
people are curious about themselves.
Of course, yeah. So they want to learn, but they also want to learn about themselves.
Talking about measurements, because I'm always, you know, practical. How do you do it exactly, sort of the operational kind? And yes, I'm very eager to sort of hear about, because why we're also having this conversation is it's easy to have training, and you train your leadership, you take in externals, or you do it in-house. You do, you know, there's what's the purpose of doing it? You can do shorter ones. Yes, I've been to training and I check the box. This is obviously an investment, and that's why I'm curious to hear about the long term, you know, because time is needed to keep on building. Mm-hmm. And Alasdair, to sort of start off with you, in terms of measuring success at the different companies that you work with, what is success? How do you define it?
The first thing that we do, I mean, everybody in L&D, you know, that is the holy grail, isn't it? You know, what's the return on the investment? How do you measure success?
We just need a keyword.
Absolutely. And interestingly, if you haven't read it, there's a great report by Mind Tools that they did. They surveyed somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 companies over, I think it's 2021, and they looked at the impact that L&D initiatives had on business outputs, and 56% had barely touched the surface. You know, and I think it was 78% had minimal impact. Only 8% had any impact on business results. 8%.
That's the keyword to management then. Yes, exactly.
Absolutely. You know, so L&D people generally in talent development, they will talk about activities. Oh, we need to do this, we need to do that. But when you talk to senior leaders, they talk about gap closures. They talk about, right, we've got a revenue gap of this. We need to increase shareholder value. We need to increase market share. And there's this disconnect between the conversations that L&D or talent have with the senior leaders. And so the first thing that we try to do is engage with as senior as possible to get the senior sponsorship buy-in. And we were very lucky because we spoke with the Chief People Officer, Mark Skinner, and he was involved right at the start, and he had this concern about developing people. And what they were seeing was, what the talent team was seeing were people leaving, saying that they hadn't had an opportunity to develop. Yet there were so many opportunities for them to develop. So where's this gap? And so the question was then, well, if you were to be able to improve retention, what kind of an impact would that have on EBIT or even hiring costs? And so you start looking at what metrics at the business output end can you start to measure. Most organizations have got an engagement score. Most organizations know what their retention rates are. Most of them know what the hiring costs are, even to the point of how long and how much money does it cost to upskill somebody from when they first join to their end of their probationary period. So you can start to put some kind of metrics on it. when we talk to operational leaders and sales leaders, then there's a real metric. Sales leaders are dead easy to speak to, because it's always about, what's your what are your targets, what are your pipelines, pipeline values. Operations, it could be things like SLAs, client retention, customer loyalty. So to go back to your question, Heidi, how do you measure it? Well, we try to tie it with business impact. We know, though, that a lot of the time it's very difficult to hit that, or to identify specifically that there's a direct correlation between what you're doing and business impact. So then we start to look at the behaviours that sit behind the changes. So, for example, one organisation we're working with, they're looking at increasing employee engagement at a specific level through developing their supervisors, because they're losing about 60% of their new starters within 3 months. And so they've calculated the cost. So they're looking at employee engagement, leadership scores at that specific level. And they know that if that goes up, they're more likely to hold on to people, and that'll have an impact on EBITDA. So we then look at what are those behaviours. And so with William Hill, we were looking at, well, it was the senior leaders identifying that developing their own people would actually benefit them, so that they could then free up more time to think strategically. And that can you imagine being in a director's role and going, actually, you've got another couple of hours this week to be able to focus on, okay, what I'm going to do, not just for this year, but for the next 2 or 3 years, and reduce the dependency of your team deferring decisions, or, expecting you to solve all the problems. There's a huge buy-in. And if you can link business impact to the behaviours, you can then reverse engineer what the specific activities are that are required. So you're not over producing different activities. And every talent team I know are limited by the time that they've got, the people that they've got in their team, and even probably more prevalent now, the budget that they've got. It's ironic that we go into periods of economic downturns, and one of the first things to get cut is the development budget. Yet as soon as you come out of that dip, people are going, we haven't got enough leaders in the business, we haven't got people who are capable enough. And when you're in an economic recession or a downturn, the common thing we hear is we have to do more with less. So they aren't helping people identify what are the key priorities, and how do we equip them to have the tools to then be able to be disciplined to focus on what those key priorities are. So going back to that metric thing, it's business outcomes coupled with what are the behaviours that sit behind that, and the 360 dives into that, because it's got an NPS score and you've also got leadership scores, and then there's certain activities that sit behind that.
Mikolaj, how did the 360 go?
So thinking about the way we measured success internally of that program was from a couple of different perspectives. First of all, what I'm always curious, is the soft stuff. So basically participants' feedback. I want to hear from people being on the program. How did they enjoy it? What have they learned? What facilitators have done that helped them learn? What made impact on them? So to hear directly from people in the program. And right now, I'm literally at the stage right now when I'm collecting all the feedback responses. And I must say that our leaders really enjoyed the level of interaction, all the comms plans that we've created, the materials they received, because the materials are engaging. It's not just workshops. Actually, they have different cards and assessments. So they really enjoyed the wealth of different tools they received. But then we look at the more hard measures, kind of more, related to numbers and measuring real change. So, of course, we do ask in the survey, what made impact? How have you applied this knowledge? And for me, the key question in the survey is, how have you shared what you've learned with your team? Because that's what Alasdair just said. Yeah, we need to build leaders that are sharing what they've learned. So it was really a pleasure to read comments in the past few days when leaders were saying in the feedback, like, oh, I've done vision workshop in my team last month. Oh, we used content from one-on-one coaching to address some underperformance. Or I shared the leadership cards with my team and we've done this and that. So truly a lot of little things that cascade down within the organization. But thinking about the hard measures, it's the 360. So before the program launched, all 120 leaders done their 360. And looking at the aggregated results is slightly overwhelming, right? Because every leader out of 120 nominated a couple of peers, direct reports, and their own manager to give feedback. So we've got a couple of thousand of responses. So I think it's like the biggest diagnosis of state of leadership at the company we've ever done, right? So a huge piece of data for anyone that loves data. Like this is, a treasure to dive into. And then 360 was repeated at the end of the program. So we wanted to repeat it immediately after the program concluded, but we decided to wait 2-3 months to have them, implemented, to help them land, to give them some time. And we've seen a slight increase in some of the levels of their leadership. So both how they are perceived as leaders and how their peers are perceiving them. So we've got clear proof, right? So there's hundreds and hundreds of responses showing that there was a change in the way they are perceived. And the last measure is Peakon. So we do measure our ENPS. We do have Peakon as a tool that helps us measure engagement. Although we know that there's so many factors impacting engagement, right? Just the fact that within a couple of last months, I had, let's say, increase within growth or management support spectrum doesn't clearly tell me that it was thanks to the program. Although what we've done to kind of have more confidence that actually it was the program, and for everyone that uses Peakon, maybe this is something that can inspire you. We actually created an audience within Peakon of all the leaders in the program, and we compared them against all the other leaders. And what we've seen is that some of the core aspects of Peakon, such as, let me just take a look, questions such as, I feel that I'm growing professionally, my job enables me to learn and develop, or my job is meaningful to me. We've seen that aspect was very stable or was growing within the Franklin Covey team, whilst within the rest of the population, it was not growing so fast or it was dropping slightly. So this is how you can somehow compare different audiences. So of course, there are plenty of things that can impact your Peakon, your ENPS score, but having these groups and comparing different groups can help you really find that impact that you are looking for.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a really interesting context piece here that needs to play into this. So 888 and William Hill are going through a period of integration. And one of the key objectives of the 4 essential roles of leadership was to provide some level of stability through this process, to demonstrate that there was still going to be investment into the William Hill people. And what we've seen from the 360, despite the turbulence, despite this, shock to the organization, is that the NPS score went up 18%, which for anybody who's going through an integration or a merger, you would never expect to see, even those levels staying the same, you'd expect to see some kind of a drop, because there's uncertainty. People don't know what that means for their job, for their role. Are they going to be made unemployed? There's a lot of uncertainty, yet this is kind of shown in the data that there is a level of stability. But interesting, one of the things that came out was that the leaders' perspective of the people that went through the program had increased significantly. So the language that the delegates had learnt, and the frameworks and the concepts that they were utilising, they had started to come across more to the people that they were reporting into as strategic leaders, which we thought was quite interesting. Mm-hmm. And bearing in mind as well, this is 8 months we've been going, Mikolaj, 8 or 9 months. Any development initiative is successful as long as there's this continued intentional application And we're seeing that, and this is the benefit of having a really sophisticated talent team within the organisation who've got great ideas of how do you keep that alive. We provide the content, we help with the facilitation, but it's the talent team that apply that practical application to reinforce the learning and then keep it alive beyond I think neuroscience of learning is 12 to 18 months to keep something alive, so it becomes more of a habit.
Yeah, I was also thinking about the sort of consistency of having it running. You're mentioning the merger, but I'm also thinking about the economic crisis, the war, like to not remove stuff because of a crisis, but to actually keep it going, to make it feel safe. Not only that it's being invested in me, but the consistency of having it, my company is still paying for this. We must be on safe grounds. That trust. But it also makes me think, because then William Hill is obviously buying your services so that you come in externally. What else than sustainable sort of trust is external providers good for?
Well, our business model is based on, we're effectively a SaaS company nowadays. So all the content, when a client like William Hill partner with us, they buy into a license agreement, so they've got access to all of our content, and then we've got this, something called the Impact platform that sits behind it, and it contains all of the content in digital form. And so depending on the impact and how you want the content being facilitated, it can be live in person, live online. It can be done either internally facilitated, or you can utilize Franklin Covey consultants. Then you've got on-demand content. You've got a just-in-time learning library. There's multiple things that you can do. But the business model is designed so that if Franklin Covey initially do the delivery, over a period of time, there's an upskilling where the internal facilitators get to know the content better, and then we kind of come out of the organisation from the delivery perspective, and the internal facilitation takes over. And a great example of this, and I hope you don't mind me sharing, Mikolaj, but one of the biggest detractors, or not a detractor, but skeptics of training development was a certain senior leader within the organisation who just didn't think training or any kind of development was worth it.
This is unheard of. This would never happen.
Never happen. But ironically, one of his team was introduced to the 7 Habits, and this chap heard about it. He got wind of what his colleague was doing, and he reached out to me and he said, right, Alasdair, I want my team to go through the 7 Habits. Right, how do we make it happen? And I spoke to Mikolaj, and for me, the 7 Habits, it's principle based, but it's not. If you know Mikolaj is very research, evidence based, practiced approach, and I was really worried that maybe it wouldn't land with him. But we got chatting. Mikolaj's had a good dip into it. He's read the book. He's gone through the content, and I've never seen anybody pick up the content and get up and running as quickly as Mikolaj did. And as a result, this senior leader, his team have been, going through a journey of the 7 Habits facilitated by Mikolaj. And that's what we try to do. We help the client in the partnership up front, we'll deliver it. But at some point, we want them to be reliant on
the champion or
absolutely
the internal ambassador.
But it doesn't mean that we move out of the organisation. It means the facilitators come out, and the client support team, which is myself and 3 or 4 others, are there, answering Mikolaj's questions and helping to guide which content to use to facilitate certain behavioural changes.
Yeah, exactly. So within the last 8-9 months, as Alasdair said, the 4 essential roles, so the program we've done this year, this was mainly facilitated by consultants from Franklin Covey, both coaching sessions and the modules. And what we had to do is to kind of embed it internally in terms of creating newsletters, following up with leaders, helping them to see if they want to use the platform, offering our help if they would like to run some team workshops, etc. So we were more behind the scenes, kind of supporting, being a voice of the company, kind of, finding the internal newsletters, opportunities, etc. But as Alasdair said, buying license from Franklin Covey means that you have access to all of the different tools. So in the future, we see a possibility of more of a mixed approach. We couldn't do it this year because, such a huge population of 120 people, like we would not be able to deliver that ourselves. But in the future, as the program embeds, we see an option of doing it in a mixed approach when Franklin Covey team is delivering bits of the program, but we, for example, do coaching, etc. So, and definitely we can use different products as well. So, I really enjoyed 7 Habits because,
From an external sort of, I'm listening to what you're saying. What I sense is professional providers selling to professional buyers, right? So you know what you do, and you know what you're buying, and you know what and where you need to come. You start with the end in mind. So this is all sort of, on a high level, and you have, you afford it, I understand, because 8 months have passed, both money and time-wise. So you're ticking all the boxes in terms of what is needed. The only thing that you need to do is obviously convince your staff and your leadership, and you clearly did that in a very successful way. All kudos to you. Well done. Thank you for the inspiration. Now, if you're not you don't have this investment in you as a small company, or lesser budgets, or I don't know, whatever. You don't really know what you're getting, but you need to start going. Where I asked you the same thing last time, Mikolaj, but more in terms of the partnership that you have been discussing now. Like, how can you start on a smaller scale? Does this make sense?
Well, can I dive in?
Yes.
There are certain things that you just have to get right. You don't have Paul Idale, the group head of talent development at William Hill. I hope I've got the right title, Mikolaj. Correct me.
Yes,
but the one thing Paul said to us was, the thing I love about Franklin Covey is you've got a lot of stuff, right? He said, but the thing I hate about Franklin Covey is you've got a lot of stuff. And he's absolutely right. And it's the content's the content, and it's great, and people get light bulb moments. But the truth of having a successful leadership or any kind of development initiative is that there has to be consistency, and it has to be relevant, and there has to be consequences of doing it and not doing it. And without that, you've got nothing. So we've got too little time, too much to do. So how do you create a development initiative that is front and centre and is a priority on people's minds? Well, it has to be relevant. They have to be able to apply it immediately and get an outcome as a consequence of applying it. So that's the positive. But also, where we see successful organisations in terms of utilising consequences is usually in retail and hospitality, where if you want to go to a different pay bracket, or you want to get a supervisory role, then you have to do certain programs, and you have to have a certain level of attendance, and you have to have completed certain things. So you have to have consequences that are both, kind of, well, if you don't, this is going to happen, but as a positive, this is what you're going to benefit from. And then there's got to be consistency. And what I mean by that, you were saying about, well, if you haven't got the budget and you haven't got the time, sales and marketing director I work with, she focused on one core model, which is the 4 cores of credibility. And when she went through the 4 essential roles of leadership initially, she just said to me, well, it's a bit vanilla, isn't it? It's common sense. Why do I need it? But I changed her way of looking at it into, she was looking at it as a diagnostic tool. Where could she apply her limited time, energy and effort to have the biggest impact on her time, on the biggest impact on the team? And we identified the 4 cores of credibility, because sales and marketing, people are very results orientated. And if you don't get results, then they look at you as though you're not very capable. What she was missing was the human element. And in the 4 cores of credibility, we talk about the intent that sits behind the things that you do, the actions that you do. So, for example, having one-to-ones. What's your intent of having a one-to-one? You know, is it to clear the path and help them? Or is it a tick box exercise and something that you do because HR tell you to do it? And then the other one is integrity. You know, if you commit to a small promise, you live up to that small promise. You know, and how often were you doing it? And we looked at her diary, and in a 6-month period, she was moving her one-to-ones 90% of the time. I said to her, you know, what kind of a message is that signalling to your team? Anyway, the point being is all she focused on was those 4 cores of credibility with the 2 intent and integrity for a 6-month period. And we checked in, and I said, how are you getting on? And she said, I'll be honest, Alasdair, we're not on track to hit target. And I was thinking, oh no. She said, we're on track to double our target. And the interesting fact wasn't that the team now felt like she had their back. You know, not one-to-ones were non-negotiable. Where they were getting additional business was through her prospective clients, who she was saying, look, I can't do that time because I've got a one-to-one, and my one-to-ones are non-negotiable. My team comes first. Because she was demonstrating a high level of integrity, more people wanted to work with her. So it's just one model applied consistently over a period of time.
Could you fit that with one of the habits? Which one would that be?
End in mind. You can apply the end in mind. Yeah. How many meetings do you hear people coming out of and then going, what was that for? And not even knowing why they're going into a meeting. But if you state, right, the whole intention of this meeting is for, the purpose of the call is, you know, this is what we're hoping to get out of it. And then a very brief agenda. Guess what? You're stating your intent. Everybody knows exactly where they're going. They can visualize what the end is. And they're not there questioning, well, okay, what's the true meaning of this? Are we going to get told off? Are we, you know? End in mind. Every time you can apply it in so many different aspects.
We are closing into our end for this chat. Let me come up with a witty question. How do you end with, like, on your high? How do you end your course? What do you leave your people with? That maybe we can leave our audience with today.
So what we're doing right now, kind of to conclude this whole program, is basically we're celebrating and congratulating people for investing all of the time in it. We will share results, key results of the 360 with all of them. So it's not just hidden, you know, it's fully transparent. We want them to see that, you know, this is the amount of people that participated. This is how you are perceived as a whole organization. So we will openly share with them what they've learned, then the impact program made on them. And also we are still reinforcing the e-learning. So when you purchase a product from Franklin Covey, you've got 1 year of license. So there's still a couple of weeks remaining, and we basically created the different, you know, comms packages for people that want to still share some learnings with their team. So it's about, you know, creating that legacy and, you know, embedding language, ensuring that people can still use the framework. Even if the program is concluded, they still have their workbooks, they still have their cards, and they still have internal team as well that can help them facilitate some of the workshops going forward. So for now, for us right now, it's the moment of summary, but also celebration and sharing it with people.
Just before Christmas, letting them fly on their own. Amazing. Did we miss anything?
I think not. I think it was a great hour nearly. So well done.
Almost a great hour.
I feel like we could have.
Fantastic.
I feel like we could have gone into more depth in certain areas, and you know, in future you could probably do, I don't know, something around sustainment or impact or something like that. You know, I think it was very high level, wasn't it? Really
covered in almost 1 hour, high level.
Yeah. But I hope the ones listening, you know, you've got an idea of what's the Franklin Covey product, how to cooperate between, you know, external and internal talent team, something around measuring your success, choosing the right product, making it relevant. So hopefully there are a couple of good takeaways for the ones listening.
Inspirations. Thank you very much. speak again. Take care and happy Christmas. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you very much.